Today, as you step into this new day, remember that God is with you. His presence surrounds you, guiding your steps and calming your fears. Even in moments of uncertainty, trust that His timing is perfect. Every challenge you face, every prayer you send up, is part of a bigger plan, a plan designed for your good. Trust that He is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it. So, as you move forward today, embrace the mystery of God's timing. Here's a thought to leave you with. What if the breakthrough you've been waiting for is already in motion, but the timing just isn't right yet? Keep trusting. God is always on time. These verses from Psalm chapter 37 emphasize trusting God's plan and timing, waiting patiently for His actions, and trusting that He will provide justice in His perfect time. Verse 3. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Verse 5. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will do this. Verse 7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Verse 9. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. Verse 11. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. Verse 23 to 24. The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in Him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with His hand. Verse 34. Hope in the Lord and keep His way. He will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are destroyed, you will see it. These verses from Psalm chapter 37 encourage us to trust in God's perfect timing and plan, even when circumstances seem difficult or unfair. They remind us that, by committing our ways to Him and patiently waiting for His actions, we can be assured that He will provide for us, protect us, and lead us in the right direction. Despite the apparent success of the wicked, we are called to trust that God will bring justice in His time. Those who hope in Him and live humbly will inherit His blessings, enjoy peace, and have their steps firmed by His guidance. Ultimately, when we remain faithful and hopeful in the Lord, we can trust that He will exalt us in His perfect timing, fulfilling His promises and bringing justice to pass. Additionally, this chapter highlights the importance of patience and stillness before God. It teaches us not to fret when we see others prosper through wickedness, as God's justice will prevail. We are encouraged to remain calm and trust that God's timing is always perfect, even when we face challenges or setbacks. By keeping our focus on Him and trusting in His guidance, we can have confidence that He will lead us through difficult times and ultimately reward our faithfulness. Trusting in God's timing can be challenging, but Psalm chapter 37 offers us profound guidance, showing us that when we trust in His plan, we can rest assured that He will provide, protect, and lead us through every season of life. Here are 7 key things to trust in God's timing based on the verses from Psalm chapter 37. The number 1. God's provision and protection. In Psalm 37 verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Life can often feel uncertain, and the pressures of daily living may cause us to worry about our needs, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. In these moments, it's natural to wonder how we will be provided for or protected in the midst of hardship. But this verse invites us to place our trust in God, who is the ultimate source of our provision and safety. When we align our lives with His will and trust in His promises, He assures us that we will have what we need. Just as a shepherd leads his sheep to green pastures where they are well cared for, God leads us to a place of peace, provision, and protection. To trust in the Lord means to depend on His wisdom and His plan for our lives, believing that He knows exactly what we need when we need it. As we focus on doing good, living in obedience to God's will, we are also promised His guidance, ensuring that we are safe and secure under His care. Consider a person walking through a dangerous area but accompanied by a strong, protective friend. The threat of harm may still be present, but the presence of the protector gives a sense of safety and assurance. In the same way, God's provision and protection offer us a sense of peace as we trust in His goodness and faithfulness. God's provision doesn't just meet our physical needs, but it extends to our emotional and spiritual well-being. He is our refuge and fortress, offering a safe place where we can rest and be replenished. As we trust Him, He gives us the strength and peace to navigate life's challenges. So, when anxiety creeps in or doubts arise about what the future holds, remember that God is the one who provides. He will lead us to safe pasture, guiding and protecting us every step of the way. Trust in His provision and protection, and find comfort in His promise that He will take care of you. Let this truth be a source of peace as you move through life, knowing that God's provision is always sufficient and His protection unwavering. Trust in Him and rest in the assurance that He will provide for you in every season. The number 2, God's faithfulness in fulfilling His plans. In Psalm 37 verse 5, commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will do this. Life often brings moments when we feel uncertain about the future, wondering if our efforts will bear fruit or if our plans will come to fruition. In these times, we may struggle with doubt and the fear that things won't turn out as we hope. But this verse assures us that when we commit our actions and decisions to God, we can trust that He will be faithful to fulfill His plans for us. The act of committing our way to the Lord means entrusting our desires, dreams, and paths to Him, knowing that His ways are higher and better than ours. It's a call to surrender our plans and desires to His will, believing that He is working for our good, even when we can't always see the bigger picture. To trust in God's faithfulness is to believe that He will bring His good purposes to pass in our lives. While we may not always understand how or when it will happen, we can be confident that God, in His perfect timing, will fulfill His promises. His faithfulness is a constant, and He will never fail to accomplish what He has set out to do in our lives. Imagine a gardener carefully planting seeds in the soil. Though the growth process takes time, the gardener faithfully waters and nurtures the plants, trusting that in due season, the seeds will sprout and bear fruit. In the same way, as we commit our ways to God, we trust that He is working behind the scenes, cultivating growth and bringing about His good purposes for us. God's plans are always for our good. Even when the road ahead seems unclear or the journey feels long, we can take comfort in knowing that God's faithfulness will never waver. He is working in us and through us to bring about His perfect will. So, when you feel uncertain or tempted to take control of your own path, remember, God's faithfulness is steadfast. Commit your way to Him, trust in His plan, and have confidence that He will bring it to completion. In doing so, you can rest in the assurance that He is fulfilling His good purposes in your life. The number 3, the importance of patience and stillness. In Psalm 37 verse 7, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Life can often feel rushed, and it's easy to become anxious when things don't happen as quickly as we'd like. We may look around and see others seemingly succeeding or prospering, even when they act unjustly or without integrity, and wonder why we're not seeing the same results. However, this verse reminds us of the importance of patience and stillness before the Lord. When we are faced with injustice or when life feels out of control, the natural response is often to become frustrated or anxious. But God calls us to be still and wait for His timing, trusting that He sees all things and will work everything out according to His will. To be still before the Lord means to cease striving, to rest in His presence, and to trust that He is in control. In the midst of waiting, we are called to remain patient, knowing that God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't align with our expectations. This is a challenge because the world often promotes the idea that we must act quickly or force outcomes. But God asks us to wait with a calm heart, trusting that He will bring about the best results. Think of a child waiting for their parent to finish something important, knowing that they must wait their turn. While the child may not understand why the wait is necessary, they trust that the parent's timing is best. In the same way, we can trust that God's timing is far better than our own, and His plans will unfold at the right moment. This passage also teaches us not to fret when we see others prospering, especially when their success seems unearned or comes through wicked means. It's easy to become envious or resentful, but God assures us that He sees all and will ultimately bring justice in His perfect way and time. Our focus should remain on trusting in His timing, rather than comparing ourselves to others. When we embrace patience and stillness, we allow God to work in us and through us. He teaches us to trust Him more deeply, grow in character, and rest in the peace that comes from knowing that He is always at work on our behalf. So, in moments of waiting or when faced with the seeming success of others, remember, God's timing is perfect. Be still before Him, wait patiently, and trust that He will bring about His plans in His time, for His glory and your good. The number 4. God's justice will prevail. In Psalm 37 verse 9, "For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land." It's not uncommon to witness injustice in the world. Wicked people may seem to prosper, and the faithful may face difficulties. In such moments, it's easy to question whether justice will ever be served or if the righteous will ever be rewarded. This verse reminds us that God's justice will ultimately prevail. While it may seem that the wicked go unpunished or that things are unfair in the present, we can be confident that God sees all things and will bring about justice in His perfect timing. The evil may flourish for a season, but their end is certain. God promises that they will not go unpunished, and His justice will be executed. On the other hand, those who place their hope and trust in the Lord will inherit His promises. Their faithfulness is not in vain. Although the world may overlook or underestimate them, God sees their devotion and will reward them with His abundant blessings. The land they will inherit is symbolic of the promises God has for His people: eternal life, peace, and the fulfillment of all His good purposes. To hope in the Lord means to trust in His ability to bring about what is right, even when it seems delayed. It means placing our confidence not in the fleeting circumstances of this world, but in the unshakable truth that God will make all things right in the end. While we may not always understand the timing of His justice, we can trust that God's perfect justice will never fail. Imagine a courtroom where a guilty person seems to escape punishment and the innocent person suffers. The judge, however, is trustworthy, and in due time, the truth will come to light, and justice will be done. In the same way, God is the ultimate judge who will right all wrongs, ensuring that justice prevails. As we navigate life's injustices, we are called to remember that God's justice will never fail. We can find peace knowing that He will judge fairly and that His promises to us remain secure. Those who remain faithful to Him, despite the trials they face, will receive their inheritance, the fullness of God's promises and blessings. So, when faced with injustice or when wondering if things will ever be set right, trust in God's justice. He will bring about what is just, and those who hope in Him will inherit all that He has promised. Rest in His perfect plan, knowing that His justice will prevail in the end. The number 5. Peace and prosperity for the meek. In Psalm 37 verse 11, "But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity." In a world that often values power, influence, and assertiveness, it can be difficult to understand the significance of meekness. The world tells us to fight for what we want, to assert ourselves, and to take control of our circumstances. Yet, God calls us to a different way of living, a way that embraces humility, gentleness, and trust in His authority. The meek, as described in this verse, are those who humbly submit to God's will, relying on His guidance and trusting in His timing. They are not driven by selfish ambition or pride, but are content with living in alignment with God's ways. While the world may overlook or undervalue meekness, God promises that the meek will inherit the land and experience peace and prosperity. To inherit the land is to receive the blessings and promises that God has reserved for those who trust in Him. It's not about striving to attain things through our own strength, but about resting in the knowledge that God will provide and lead us to what is good and right. The meek experience peace because they do not fight for control. Instead, they trust that God is in control and that His plans are always for their good. Imagine a child who does not demand their own way, but trusts their parents' decisions and care. The child may not understand every choice, but they have a sense of peace because they know they are loved and cared for. In the same way, the meek find peace in knowing that God is directing their lives and that His timing is always perfect. The promise of prosperity for the meek is not just about material wealth, but a life filled with spiritual richness, joy, and fulfillment. When we live humbly and follow God's ways, we experience the true prosperity of peace in our hearts, contentment in our circumstances, and the joy of knowing we are living in accordance with God's will. So, when faced with the pressures of the world to assert ourselves or fight for what we think we deserve, let us remember the promise to the meek. Trusting God's timing and living humbly brings peace and prosperity that far surpasses anything the world offers. By embracing meekness and following His ways, we will experience the fullness of God's blessings in our lives. The number 6. God's guidance and support in our journey. In Psalm 37 verses 23 to 24, the Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in Him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with His hand. Life's journey is not always smooth. There are times when we encounter obstacles, face challenges, or even experience moments of failure. During these times, it's easy to feel discouraged, as though we're slipping or about to fall. However, this verse reminds us that when we delight in the Lord and trust in His guidance, He is there to make our steps firm. Even when we stumble or falter, we are not alone. God's hand is there to steady us, to keep us from falling, and to guide us back onto the right path. His support is constant and unwavering, offering us the strength and stability we need to keep moving forward. To delight in the Lord means to find joy in His presence, to seek His will, and to trust in His plan. When we center our lives around Him, He promises to guide us. Even when we encounter difficulties or face moments of weakness, we can take comfort in knowing that God is not distant. He is actively involved in our lives, helping us to stand firm. Think of a child learning to walk. At first, they stumble and fall, but their parent is always there to catch them, offering support and guidance. Over time, with the parent's steady hand, the child becomes more confident in their steps. In the same way, God is with us, guiding us through life's challenges, providing the strength we need to stand and move forward. Though we may experience times of stumbling, God's faithfulness never wavers. His hand is always there, ready to uphold us. This assurance doesn't mean we will never face difficulties, but it does mean that when we do, we can trust that God will steady us and help us rise again. So, when you face moments of weakness or fear that you might fall, remember that God's guidance and support are with you. He promises to make your steps firm and uphold you with His hand. Trust in His steady presence, knowing that with Him by your side, you will not fall. The number 7. God will exalt us in His perfect time. In Psalm 37 verse 34, hope in the Lord and keep His way. He will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are destroyed, you will see it. In a world that often values instant results and quick rewards, it can be challenging to trust in God's perfect timing. We may feel overlooked, wondering if we'll ever see the fulfillment of His promises. Yet, this verse assures us that God will exalt us in His time, and in the end, His justice will prevail. To hope in the Lord means to place our trust in His timing and His plan, rather than seeking to advance on our own terms. When we follow His ways and live in obedience, God promises that He will exalt us, not according to the world's standards, but according to His perfect will. The inheritance of the land symbolizes the blessings, peace, and fulfillment of His promises to those who trust and remain faithful to Him. This passage also speaks to the certainty that we will witness the ultimate triumph of God's justice. While the wicked may seem to prosper for a time, they will ultimately face the consequences of their actions. The faithful, however, will see the fulfillment of God's promises in their lives. We can have hope, knowing that in the end, God's plan will unfold perfectly, and we will experience the blessings that come from trusting Him. Think of a race where the winner is announced only at the end. During the race, there may be moments of struggle and doubt, but the final victory belongs to those who persevere to the finish line. In the same way, though we may face struggles and delays, the final victory belongs to those who trust in God's timing, and they will experience the fulfillment of His promises. When we trust in God's timing, we place our hope in the fact that He knows what is best for us, and He will exalt us in the right moment. This isn't just about earthly success, but about receiving the true blessings that God has set aside for His faithful ones: peace, fulfillment, and the inheritance of all that He has promised. So, When life feels uncertain or when you wonder if God will ever fulfill his promises, remember this. Hope in the Lord, keep his way, and trust that in his perfect timing, he will exalt you. You will witness his promises come to fruition, and you will see his justice prevail. In conclusion, Psalm chapter 37 encourages us to trust in God's perfect timing and sovereignty over our lives. It reminds us to remain patient and steadfast, knowing that though challenges may come, God will act in due time. As we commit our ways to him, we can rest assured that he will guide our steps, protect us, and ultimately fulfill his promises. By patiently waiting on the Lord, we acknowledge his control over every circumstance and trust that he will work everything for our good. In the end, God's perfect timing will always bring about what is best for us, even when we cannot see the full picture.